How much money does the Tweedy Pubs channel make? As you may be aware, here on YouTube, ads are shown alongside videos, and if your channel meets the necessary criteria, then you can earn a cut of that revenue. The channel Tweedy Pubs has been going for just over 2 years. It started in August 2023, and during that space of time, I believe I've published about 111 videos. So that averages to about one a week over that period of time, although I don't publish to a regular schedule. The channel currently has around 19,000 subscribers, and across all of those videos, a total of 1.8 million views. The total amount that I've earned from this channel in that 2 years has been just over £8,500. That might sound like a decent chunk of cash for just making videos wherein I go on a pub crawl. But even the simplest of those videos is usually about 20 hours of work, typically a day for research and preparation and planning, half a day of filming and about a day of editing. So even if we just call it that absolute bare minimum 20 hours of video, 2,000 hours of work to make those 111 videos, that works out at an hourly rate of just under £4. As a reminder, the UK national minimum wage is £12.21 an hour. And although this channel alone possibly doesn't quite constitute a full-time job, I would say I on average spend about 3 days a week working on it. I also have a couple of other YouTube channels that occupy some of the rest of that time. Only one of those is monetized, and that earns significantly less than this one. So overall, I think it would be fair to say that YouTube is now my full-time job. I don't have another day job. As of 2 years ago, I quit my proper job. Incidentally, absolutely none of this is meant to sound like a cry for help. I have savings and investments, and that's keeping the whole thing afloat. And I suppose, in a sense, I've effectively taken early retirement. I thought it might be interesting to go through the top 5 videos from the channel, the 5 most viewed videos, and see how much each one of those has earned. In 5th place, the Wetherspoons video, the video about Wetherspoons pubs in London. This was a relatively early one on the channel. It was published in January 2024, and it was the first one that made it over 10,000 views. It's since then settled onto a more relaxed rate, and the current count is something like 42,000 views. So the grand total that that video has earned so far is £156.52. This was one of the more time consuming to film given the travel time in between all the individual pubs. They were all spread out across London, but I don't recall spending a lot of time on the research for this one because most of these pubs are modern conversions. They don't have long histories as pubs. So this video was perhaps 3 days work in total, something like that. In 4th place is the video about draft bass. This has had a similar number of views to the Wetherspoons video, currently at about 43,500. And possibly due to being a shorter video, it has overall lower watch time, but somehow still managed to earn more money than the Wetherspoons video, coming in at a total so far of £192.66. This video was particularly beset with difficulties, particularly at that first pub, the Express Tavern, where everything seemed to be going awry. And I think I did the filming for the other pub on a different day because I was just fed up that day. So the filming was a bit dragged out. That meant it took a bit longer than usual. In 3rd place, and probably the most controversial video on this channel, was the one about the disappearance of bitter from pubs in London being replaced by American-style citrusy pale ales. This had a similar number of views to the previous one, 45,000, and a similar earnings to the previous video at £196 or thereabouts. This was a relatively simple video on the research and planning side of things. I did spend probably about a day digging into the history of bitter to confirm that that did indeed exist in the Victorian era, but most of the rest of it was really just a case of crystallising my thoughts on this issue, and it's something I've touched on before in lots of other videos. I did try to choose my words very carefully in this case because I was treading a fine line between some contentious issues there. Editing, though, was relatively straightforward, this being mostly what I think is called a talking head video, a bit like this one. So this was probably just a case of 3 days work. I think, thereabouts. But still, if we call that 24 hours of labour for just shy of £200, we're still not hitting that UK minimum wage level. As predicted, this video ruffled some feathers, and some people absolutely hated it. It clearly rubbed some people up the wrong way because it dared to question the sacred grapefruit. But I'm particularly proud of this video, and if you look through the comments, although there are obviously some dissenters there is a huge groundswell of support for that, and this clearly struck a chord. In second place, the Ploughman's Lunch video. These two videos in the two top spots are really in a league of their own, being over 100,000 views, and this was the first of those two that managed to make it to those lofty heights. This was quite a short video, however, about 7.5 minutes, so the overall watch time is not significantly higher than the previous three. Correspondingly, neither were the earnings, with the current total being £261. This video really took me by surprise. I'd made it on a bit of a whim, essentially, responding to a comment from a previous video about whether or not it was still possible to find a Ploughman's Lunch in London. That was the premise of the video. I did then go down a bit of a rabbit hole, as I seem to be inclined to do in the research, trying to find documentary evidence for the first existence of a Ploughman's Lunch, including reading 800 lines of 14th century poetry in Middle English. So that probably occupied about a day or so. But after that, it was a relatively straightforward video. Again, mostly talking head, not a huge amount of editing to do, and the runtime of 7.5 minutes made it a bit less effort as well on the editing side. So I think, again, that was probably just a straightforward 3 days of work, something like 24 hours of effort, but still we're not quite reaching minimum wage there, are we? That video made it up to 100,000 views in about the first 3 weeks. But since then, and this is over a year ago now, it does just seem to have trickled along. It doesn't really seem to have gathered a significant number of new viewers. Perhaps we have reached saturation point with the number of people who have a nostalgic yearning for the Ploughman's Lunch. In first place, and a relatively recent video, the video I made on the differences between the saloon bar and the public bar in broadly Victorian pubs. The working title for that was The Anatomy of a Pub. That passed 100,000 views in the first 2 weeks, and it's still gaining a few here and there. I think it's currently on 132,000 views. It leaves all the other videos in the dust in terms of earning, currently at just shy of £550. I did, however, really put a lot of effort into this one. It was at least 2 days, possibly 3, of research, a lot of background reading to get to that point. And the filming was spread over 3 different days in different pubs in different parts of London. And I was trying to be really meticulous with the editing as well. Easily 40 hours, quite possibly more than that, of effort went into that. If we call it 40 hours, then this might be the one and only video where I have actually managed to earn minimum wage. I think that would come to something like £13 an hour, wouldn't it? But still, very proud of that video, really pleased with the response to it. So there you have it. That's how much I've earned from YouTube so far, just from the advertising revenue. There are, of course, other ways to make money on YouTube. There is the membership program, which they keep badgering me about to join. There are other third-party versions of that, things like Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. There are things like merchandise, which I've occasionally considered, but being not much of a t-shirt or hoodie wearer myself, I'm not exactly sure what form that would take. And of course, sponsorships, but I haven't exactly had any particularly credible offers for those so far. It's almost as though no one's really interested in advertising a product via a middle-aged man wearing tweed. I've always been a bit reluctant with all of those things because it might make this all feel a bit more like an obligation rather than something that I mostly enjoy doing at the moment. I will admit that sometimes the filming can actually be a little bit stressful when things go awry, as was the case in that Draft Bass video, but I genuinely enjoy the research. I love being able to dig into these topics, particularly looking into the history of these pubs. And bizarrely or surprisingly, I actually really enjoy video editing as well, which I know some YouTubers can't stand. They find it a real chore, but I really like that creative process of bringing the whole thing together. The channel is slowly but surely growing, and although there's a lot of fluctuation from month to month in the earnings, the overall trend is roughly upwards. It's clearly not a livable wage yet though, is it? And I'd hope by this point, about 2 years in, that the numbers might be a little bit higher than that. But as noted earlier, I've basically taken early retirement, so I'm getting by just fine. I hope that was interesting, possibly informative. Thanks very much for watching. Cheers.